Hello and welcome to the Cash News Podcast, your go-to source for informative conversations about all things cash and currency. From cash security and payments technology to the cash supply chain, we're here to share insights on the issues shaping the world of cash today. Join your hosts, Tom Meehan, Shaun Ferrari, and Brad Moody, as they dive into the latest trends, strategies, and technology. This is the Cash News Podcast. Now, here's Tom, Shaun, and Brad.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cash News Podcast. I'm joined by my good friend and esteemed co-host Shaun Ferrari. Brad Moody's somewhere on assignment. Who knows what he's doing? But I know that you guys are together next
week.
On
assignment, are we gonna pop him up in a little corner box and be like, and coming possible. In from wherever he is, here's Brad. No, but hello everybody. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm gonna be hanging out with Brad next week at the IACOA conference out in Vegas. So I'm sure we do have a couple of podcasts lined up to record out there. So look forward to some good on-site content coming at you from me and Brad. You never know what you're going to get with that, so I definitely stay tuned for what could come at you.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And we're just for the audience, because we committed to doing these much more frequently, and in between something we started new. We discussed it a little bit, but once a month we'll do a podcast that one of us will do an intro, and it'll either be a webinar, or maybe a recording from currency research, a live session, or even yesterday we recorded the first, which is really cool. It came out really, really good. I almost feel like we shouldn't tell people what it is, but it's you'll, by the time you hear the other one should already be published, or vice versa. But we actually took an article that someone on the team wrote, and we have AI generated podcast hosts with us on it. It's pretty cool. So the idea here is to continue to drive the content, and between the three of us, especially with the travel between the three of us, there's going to be no shortage of those type of things. And because we have such a great partnership with currency research, we have done this in the past. There'll be sessions that we just feel like, hey, as opposed to us talking about the session, probably makes sense for you to just listen to it. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited about that. So what's cooking, Shaun? What do we want to talk about? I know there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things to chat about. One of which I think probably the most topical to our cash listeners and our payment listeners, everybody, all of our listeners, is there was the recent disruption to electrical supply over in Spain, and I think power was out for 12, 18 hours, a significant chunk of time, and of course that has a whole range of effects that isn't just payments related. However, we're going to talk about the payment stuff. And I feel like, I don't know if folks get tired of hearing us say it, but we will say it again here, that all these electronic payment methods are great. They have a use cases all over the place, but you cannot ever really get away from the reliability of cash when you need it. If there's no power, you need to purchase something. Cash is where it's at.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting. Most of the news stories that I read and heard on and saw around the Spain outage, payments were mentioned. I think actually all of them were mentioned, that payment processing was down. And I wish I could remember which, because it was a major news agency said, there was the folks with cash were the one, they actually said this, were the ones that were able to buy food, able to do things. And so we do say it all the time. It probably is a broken record, right? Like that people hear it, but I think there's this hyper reliance on technology. And, this is one of those things where every time there's an event, people go like, man, this is why cash is so important. And as we become more reliant on technology, I don't see this as getting better. Like, since we started the podcast, it's like a sci-fi novel, right? We started the podcast during a pandemic.
Yeah.
There's an invasion, then there's a couple wars, and you almost you almost can't imagine that since we started we had, and I could be wrong, so anybody who wants to challenge this, we had a swift outage in all of Canada for a day. We had two major cell phone outages. We had another swift outage in North America, and then there was a complete outage in another European country. Um, Puerto Rico and two other South American countries multiple times, multiple times had outages. So more than a dozen, not not like, hey, DC was out of power for a couple hours, complete countries, and in some cases, massive countries, not necessarily small, losing all power and all connectivity. And then we kind of continuously talk about the need to be smart about it. And I think even you and I presented somewhere, and the question was like, well, how much money should I keep? And it was like, well, it kind of depends on who you are and what you do. And like, if you have 5 kids, you might need a little bit more money than if you have 2. And if you have babies, you might need a little bit more money than others. And I don't have a cash reserve in my house, but I always make sure that I have some money, and I try even when I travel to do it. And not so much that I'm worried about a catastrophic event, it's I don't want to worry about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right, and I think, for a lot of temporary outages, and we can define temporary, but like the some of the thought on the electronic payment side, particularly on a digital currency type thing or mobile wallet thing, has been, well, look, if you tokenize it, you can operate offline. And it's like, sure, okay, there's a whole bunch of caveats around that, but at some point you have to go back online, and at some point you have to then power your device. And there are those offline things that are put on like a credit card type thing, a piece of plastic, right? Like, okay, well, so that doesn't need power, but you need to transact to somebody with that. So that receiving terminal needs power. So again, at the end of the day, will certain offline capabilities help you when you don't have any cell service because you're in the basement of a building? Yes, probably. Great. Will they help you when your cell network goes down for an hour? Yes, probably. Are they going to help you when you're out of power for 12 hours? Doubtful. So I think, and you're right, these things always come up. And a lot of times folks will look at them and say, it's a one-off thing, don't worry. But to your earlier point, they might be individually one-off things, but they're not when you look at them collectively. I mean, they always seem to pop up, whether it's once a year, a couple times a year, with enough frequency that you kind of you can't ignore them. You can't just chalk them up to it'll never happen. I think you used the example, Tom. You were traveling once when I think it was the AT&T outage, right?
AT&T
went down,
outage in the whole entire country.
Yeah, and you're at an airport and you want to get a cab. What do? You need cash. So you don't necessarily think about it a whole lot. It's kind of until it happens to you type thing, right? And now you're like, well, gee, maybe I do want to keep whatever, a couple $100, $1,000, whatever, depending on your situation, in cash, so that if something does go down and I need to go buy something, I can.
That AT&T one is kind of the one that I say, like, what made it so interesting to me is that Verizon was up and AT&T was down, and you had like people literally staring, and like I literally talk to people about this. I tell this story all the time, where they're like, I have no cash, I use Uber. My phone's not working, and it's like, oh, there's Wi-Fi in the airport. Like, that wasn't even a complete disconnection, so like you actually could get around it.
Sure.
But I remember talking to a guy who was my age, not an elderly man, about like, well, if you have your debit card loaded in your phone, depending on what ATM, you can actually tap it on there. And then I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, like this person like literally is a grown man, a business person, well dressed, like who doesn't know what to do because his cell phone doesn't work. And I'm thinking, man, like this is crazy. And I'm like, you don't have any cash. And he's like, no, why would I have cash? And I'm just, so it is a real thing. And this is connected to this, but not. So yesterday, and I'm always careful with dates because we're usually 2 weeks behind on the publishing. I posted something on LinkedIn. So there was a congressman, Warren Davidson, who wrote an op-ed piece, and it for, I think it was in the Cincinnati Times. Let me check now because now I want to make sure. But it was a Cincinnati newspaper that it came out in, and then he put it on his page of just about payment of choice, and this isn't political. He kind of put all of the reasons why you want people to be able to use cash, and I kind of want to take, as a former retailer, to the other side of, if in those scenarios, in the scenarios when you do have an outage, if you don't take cash, you're out of business, and you could be out of business for hours and hours. Where if you take cash, you can continue to go. I often tell this story too. I visited my local Shake Shack right across the street from our office, and their credit card system was down, and I went up, and the manager was literally standing at the counter credit card terminals, and he said, "Oh, do you have cash?" And I said, "Oh, I have a couple bucks." And he said, "No, it's your lunch is on us. It's our fault." And they could take cash, and so he was essentially, I was going to pay, and he's like, "No, it's on us. It's our fault." And while I think that's a great customer service side, they actually had the ability to take cash, where there are other places that couldn't, and then you are out of business in that sense. Where I've been in, I think a good friend of ours, I could probably tell this story. Stacy Diamond and I were in Sacramento, and I went to Starbucks, and Starbucks' systems were down, and they couldn't take their own app or credit card, and I think I had $45 on me. I didn't have a lot of money, and I'm online drinking, and people are panicking, and I'm like, "If you want, I'll buy you your coffee, like no big deal." And they're like, "Well, I'll Venmo you." I'm like, "No, it's okay." Like, and I when I left that, what I thought about is, like, again, kind of I forget to tie these stories together. Like, people are panicking because they can't buy their coffee in the morning. Like, what happens when you can't, and it was like, it wasn't, I'm not exaggerating. Like, they were freaking out. And unlike Shake Shack, Starbucks is like, if you don't have cash, like, you can't.
Too bad.
Too bad. And it added more because they had their own app that didn't work. And then I go to they hold your money and make interest on it. Now, in my head, I'm thinking of all the things there. But the point is it's not Starbucks' fault that there was an outage, an internet outage in Sacramento at that time. But in that scenario, that Starbucks took cash. But I remember in COVID, for a very short period of time, Starbucks might have stopped taking cash, if you remember. And then 2 days later, they did. So, like, cash it's a payments of choice for me. And if you're listening to saying we're biased, the Cash News podcast, certainly we are a little biased, right? Because we're in the payment space, but we're really not. Like, I would argue that you and I are probably the most open to, like, digital payments exist, that they're here.
Oh yeah, I have nothing against. I primarily use digital payments. I like them. I support them. I think people should, to your point, they should have a choice on what they want to use. If they want to use cash, use cash. If you want to use digital payments, use digital payments. There's plenty of use cases for both. I think my big thing is for the push, and I will say, and maybe again it's because the circles that we kind of run in, and this stuff is talked about all the time, but I think I've heard, you can tell me if you agree, I don't know. I've heard a lot less of the cash is dying and going away line probably over the last year than I had in the years leading up to it. I think, I don't know if it's just a talking point that's kind of gotten old, so it's stopped being said, or if people are kind of acknowledging the fact that there is a place for cash. It's not, people might use it less at point of sale, but are they holding more of it? It seems like they are. Do you need to have some on hand to make those emergency payments if you can't use electronic payments? Yes. We're seeing more and more here, right, in the US anyway, discrepancies in prices now being charged just to get away from interchange fees and other fees. I think that are being levied on bills now, overtly of, oh, you're going to use a credit card. Well, that's going to cost you whatever 2% more than if you pay with cash. I think people for a long time knew that there were these additional fees kind of in there baked in, but now that retailers and restaurants are starting to kind of differentiate that price more, people are more in tune to it, and where it is getting more expensive all the time and there's other fees and tariffs and all that sort of stuff, people are attuned to, hey, what's driving this price up? And I've heard from several people that they are now getting some cash before they go out to dinner at their restaurant because they know what their bill is going to be.
Yep.
They know what it's going to be with cash. They know what it's going to be with the credit card, and they're like, well, why am I going to? I'm going to pay with cash. I don't need to pay an extra $20 because I want to pay. Well, that's the hype, but an extra $5 because I'm going to pay with a credit card.
I mean, but I agree. And actually, to your point though, like we both have kids. We both have relatively large. If we're going out to eat with 5 people, and we live in similar demographic areas, like it is not a couple dollars anymore when someone charges me 6%. It's more than $10 usually, on a meal. So like, there's, I think that, out of convenience, right? I'm not afraid to say, like, someone says 2%, I'm going like, who cares? But 6% on a $250 bill, it's not a life-changing amount of money, but it's also it's still money that
it's
doesn't
that cup of coffee or two, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So
you're like, all right.
And actually, I've seen more of an uptick, and I live in northern Jersey in Bergen County. I don't know that there's a restaurant, and I live in a very nice neighborhood, and we have a lot of restaurants in the area, and our producer who's hiding grew up in a very similar area, and I would argue that I think all of the restaurants that we go to, whether it be a pizza place or a more formal place, now have a fee of anywhere between 3 and 6%, which again, I guess it's a choice to pay it, but I do see the change. I would agree with you. I don't know that I hear as much cashless. I think the places where I hear cashless are the groups that it benefits them. Like and I think, but that again, I'm not I don't believe that I'm not naive to that people use cash the same way they did 30, 40 years ago, nor do I think they will ever again. But I do believe that even if I didn't work here or did this podcast, I don't think that you as a merchant should make the decision of how I can pay. Like, I really genuinely don't believe that. And I would argue that it's not, we talk a lot about the unbanked population, but what about the aging population that, isn't really going to have Apple Pay, and that's not a shot at older people. It's just the reality. I feel old now. Like, my kids are showing me stuff, and I'm my life is around technology, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, so I can't imagine when I'm 70 what I'm going to be like when I'm like, what is this nonsense? So it is a tricky piece of it. So we'll continue to talk about real stories with it. I am excited that I'm seeing more about payments of choice. I think that there are more people recognizing that, and I think that's driven by a constituent saying, some people are just saying, I want the choice. I might be one of those people. Like, I just want the choice. I don't want other people making decisions for me when it comes to how I spend my hard-earned money. But at the flip side, I'm not the privacy guy that's concerned that you're tracking me, because I know I could track you anyway. Like, if like I anytime I ever do, the first, I think in DC when I did that presentation in DC, and there were some folks that worked for government. Oh, you could never track me. I'm like, oh, let me show you. Like, of course I can. Like, you're like, of course I can. You have a digital device with you. Like, you've got to be a hermit and not to be tracked. You've got to be in a cave with no connectivity, and none of us live that lifestyle. So I'm not afraid of someone knowing what I spend my money on. I just want to be able to use the money way I want. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's me with kids, especially, like, I want my kids to use cash because it teaches them, like, it's gone when it's gone. Like, there's a thing, like my daughter has Apple Pay, and it's like, oh, I could buy that. I'm like, no, use your money because then you're going to see it deplete and you're going to understand it. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why, but I think we'll continue to beat this horse to death because it's going to continue to happen. And I think I think that we'll continue to see events with technology failing, whether they be whether they be intentional or not. I'm the verdict is still out of what caused the Spain outages. There was a lot of conspiracy theories and things that went out. There was this solar storm theory that and all of these other pieces. I think the New York Times post that they're still searching. There were a couple theories of how the lights, opinion pieces. The Wall Street Journal did one of how the lights went out. And this drives the narrative a whole bunch of ways, like, solar, nuclear, all of these things. But the reality is that the grid is still the grid. It's not how you create the power. It's how you deliver the power. And then we are in a world that is highly connected. So we'll keep talking about that and keep pushing that. What about the economy? I mean, last time we talked about that. What are you thinking here? Right? The first time since 2022 that we had a decline in GDP, right? Am I wrong on that? You're usually better at that than me.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think I don't know. I think
that's the show, and I don't want to talk about it.
No, no, I'm just disgusted with it. It's not that I don't want to talk about it. It's I think it's a challenging time. It goes to what we were just talking about. I mean, I think everybody is being more mindful and kind of battening down the hatches a little bit of from a consumer and business standpoint of how are we spending money, where are we spending money, what are we paying in fees, and just starting to get a bit more savvy about it, because there's this feeling like you have to, because we don't know what's coming. I mean, the higher prices, the tariffs, all that sort of stuff are going to slow down growth. I mean, I don't care if you support them or don't support them. That's the reality of them. Higher prices will slow down growth. That's just Absolutely. What's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of common sense, right? Like, but yeah. I think so. And I'm not a doomsdayer. Like, I sometimes feel like I sound like one because I'm so my life is so focused on risk. I think the economy runs in cycles. I think this is part of life. However, I do think that there are things to be very aware of aside from the GDP. I think so. I did not read this article, but I'm looking at I have notes on the side of my screen that I'm like in the middle of the night, I'll be like, oh, this is something cool to talk about. And then I never finish my thought. So like the Wall Street Journal posted literally this morning, I think, forget GDP. It's all about the jobs report. That's what matters. And so like we talk about this all the time, Sean, like the economy is very much based on confidence. And because when people are confident, they spend money. When you spend money, more money comes in and the cycle continues. It's the same as bank runs. Like that's what it is. So when you lose confidence, you start to buckle down and not spend money. And that creates the title of what it is. That's why inflation is dangerous, because inflation doesn't always stop people from spending. If people are confident, they keep spending and prices keep rising, and then you get into the loop of what we were before. So it's the confidence that drives it. But like what I worry about sitting in as a CEO of a company that manufactures things is we have a really good, robust plant at Control Tech, and we manufacture all over the world. So we're insulated from the worst of the worst. However, some of my friends, very good personal friends who are in similar roles, have stopped a lot of their shipments coming in, which means all of those people that work at docks stop working, which means they stop spending money. And the cycle goes the other way as well, where our economy is built on all of the things continuing to run. Then everybody works. Truck drivers drive the trucks, delivery drivers deliver to the stores stock the shelves. And it sounds very common sense when you say it, but I don't think a lot of people think about it. It's just like when home builders are, talking about they're struggling because of the cost of goods. Well, that's right now. Like if people are spending money, houses go up. We know this, right? Like before. Right after COVID, right? Like you could sell your house for 4 times the amount. And you'd be like, this doesn't make sense. because the demand was there.
Yeah. Well, and home builders have always been throughout history one of the folks to listen to in terms of what's happening for economic signals. Because I mean, when your story about truck drivers and delivery folks, I mean that's all 100% accurate. It's the same with home builders, right? It's when you think of what happens after you. Not only do you need a bunch of inputs to build the home, after you build the home, you need to then furnish the home. You buy appliances, everything, right? That's an entire new, and it's not little. I mean, it's somebody's buying the house, so you've got it runs through the entire economy. So when you start hearing home construction and new home sales and new home builders start to come down again, it's a signal of, to your point, people are not confident. And without confidence, you're not going to buy a house because that's a 30-year commitment, and it's a lot of money. And that then trickles all the way down to everybody making all those goods. So the signs are there that this is not good for the economy. Now, to your point, is it cyclical? Sure. I would argue that usually these cyclical things aren't induced by bringing a sledgehammer in to induce the pendulum swinging the other way. So I think of course, you've had Volcker at the Fed do it, the whole analogy of bringing a sledgehammer to a punch bowl type thing and killing the party to crack inflation and raise the interest rates to slow the economy. Have drastic things been done in the past? Sure. But I think the difference now, I would argue, is that when you have the Fed doing things to control the economy, it's generally done in a planned way, or it at least feels more planned. I think the uncertainty with what's happening right now is the primary problem. I think if there was a well laid out plan that business leaders, consumers, everybody could kind of say, yeah, okay, I get it. This is what we're doing. That's fine. I think what's shaking people right now is it's hard to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I agree. I think the thing I would say is I do believe that, this is still a bit of adjustment, but I also will say that the economy related to tariffs, there are domino effects that you do not and will not see for months because 100%. Of the way goods come in. I don't think the average. I genuinely don't think the average population understands that things sit on the water for 8 to 10 weeks, so that a retailer would have already purchased fall goods, in some cases, right. And so you don't, that cycle is perpetual. It doesn't ever stop. Like you have to do that because you can't bring things in too early. You can't bring things in too late. So, this is the same as COVID. Like I remember being on multiple calls of people saying, why can't you just open a factory? Well, it takes about 9 months if everything's perfect to build a fabrication factory, and that's when everything is absolutely perfect and everything's available, and nothing's ever perfect or available. So like even in moving goods to another country, it does take months to do that, and then there's a learning curve. I
was going to say labor. You need labor to run those places.
Yeah, the labor learning curve is real. And like I'll use the Apple example because I think I love when I read the news. Is I want to say it was the New York Times. They had a really cool picture of like an apple with like this weird bite out of it, and the headline was, "Could Apple exist without ties to China? Probably not." And the largest companies in the world will have to make huge adjustments. I keep going back to our own place where we were kind of built on resilience all along. That's why we had such a good time during COVID. But being built on resilience still still means you have a lot of work to do, where Apple was in a position where they had almost everything in China and then they had to move it. So they've actually publicly said that, all iPhones that are being shipped to the US will be made in India, and then everything else will still be made in China. So that's they've got to be,
Yeah,
I know
well,
they have more cash than most countries. So.
yeah, but I yeah, but I think the other piece is, I mean, in terms of, oh well, jobs will come to the U.S., people will start manufacturing things in the U.S. To your point, it might be 9 months to build a factory somewhere very quickly. Good luck building a new factory in the U.S. in
9 months. No.
9 months.
Especially
I mean, you're in years to build a new
years.
facility.
I mean, I think you might see some in some Midwestern states with some pushing. You could probably see faster. But the other thing though is that and this isn't a bad or a good thing. It's a reality. Using the iPhone as an example, I love my iPhone. I don't think that I would not buy an iPhone. So I'll be honest. Like I think I'd still have to buy that phone if it was $3,000. I can guarantee you I would wait until the phone was not functional to do that. Versus now it's every 2 years. I kind of go get a new phone. It's just what I do. Like it consistently for the last, regardless of where I work, I think for the last 15 years, just get a new phone every couple of years. If it was $3,000 a phone, which is what it would, $3,500, I'm pretty sure that would change the market dramatically, even for folks that can. This isn't about. This is we always say discretional spending is different. Like there is an emotional thing where someone will go like, yeah, I can afford that, but doesn't mean I'll get it. It's always the potato chip and soda comment is the thing that amazes me is we still buy potato chips and soda even though they're $10 for a bag of Doritos, and it's like Doritos aren't supposed to be $10 a bag. Like that's wild.
Yeah.
But it works.
And I think there's a generational shift that will occur, right? Because if that iPhone is $3,000, are you going to buy a $3,000 phone for your kid in middle school or high school that they're just going to lose on the bus, or break in the somewhere along? No, hell no. They're gonna switch to a different device.
Yep.
And then to your point, you've had iPhones because you've always had an iPhone. Well, if somebody starts off with something else, they're probably going to stay with that something else.
Yeah.
So all these things take time and years to flow through an economy, right? It doesn't happen instantaneously. So I think that's where it's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out. The other thing is, as things are shifted and built in the U.S., again, this isn't a good or bad thing, but our labor here is more expensive than labor in many by a little bit. Yeah. So not only do you have it just changes the entire cost of there's a reason these products are made in other places. So
I agree. I think look, I think after all that we said is I think that the best way to get through this is to continue the course, not to continue the course. And my plumber was here the other day and was talking to him, good dude. And he was like, yeah, I pulled all my money out of my 401k and moved it into something else. And I'm like, that's the stuff that's like, oh, like,
I don't know about that. But
I said, I don't know. I said that he's a friend. And I said, and he's like, well, I didn't lose anything by doing it. And I said, okay. But I said that, and then I'm thinking, this is the problem. This is what happens. This creates, because him pulling all his money, if everybody pulls all their money out, that affects the stock market, right? It's this whole cycle of everything. So I continue to, for wearing my CEO hat, this isn't a time to panic. It's a time to look and be smart and understand the world. I feel like, our customer bases are affected and we're here to help support them. And, we have a plan as best we can. I think your sledgehammer analogy, and we always talk about this different, right? Like, that was a very intentional statement. Like we're gonna cause pain in the economy to drive inflation down. Again, great books, great history, but like I don't know that. I continuously say this, and I'm waiting for someone to come up with a really good scientific response. Is looking at the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s compared to 2025 with AI, with global travel, with connected device, we are not at all the same. So history is important to follow, but understand that, like, it's just not where it is. I mean, we are so different economically. And what was it yesterday? Was it? I shouldn't. I don't want to misquote this one because I'll get in trouble. But one of the BlackRock or Blackstone, publicly, what they bought $235 million of Bitcoin yesterday. So
yeah,
I'm
and I mean,
searching it live.
You mentioned the fact that these things move faster. We've talked about this before with some of the bank issues that have been out there in the past with crypto and what have you. But things do move faster, and like your friend that pulled, or the plumber that pulled all the 401k money out. There are ways, and I'm not sure where he was on the spectrum in terms of the swiftness which he was able to transact that, but there are ways now, and it's getting more and more prevalent, that with things like deposit tokens, stable coins, you can transact faster with these financial markets. So it's like, okay, I can move my 401k to a token. The token is now in my wallet. My wallet can do it. It just kind of, where before things would take, well, I've got to wait till market closes, and then the transfer has to take 3 days to move that to here, and I need to, it's a slower process, which builds in some sort of cooling periods, right, where you can like think about it and be like, oh man, maybe that's not a great idea. Whereas if you're just panic doing things, the tools are there to let you panic do things now. Which when everything's functioning well, those are great tools to help you move things quicker and get things done faster, which is great. But when you're panicked, they can hurt as well. So it's different. And I was at an event this past week, and there's a lot of talk about agentic AI and how all these AI agents are going to be making decisions for you, right, based on your parameters and just executing things. Well, that's great. Again, in a good, in a positive, things are going well type environment, that's wonderful. Well, if you have rules set up or behavior set up, or however you're training your agentic AI, or however it's being trained to make swaps in the stock market, or to invest certain ways, or to pull different financial triggers, when these weird things happen, who knows what's going to happen automatically for you and faster, and where you are in that loop to pull these triggers. So it is a new world that's out there.
It really is, and I think I do think it's cool that you brought this up. I didn't think we were going to get into this one. I do think that agentic AI, and for the listeners, agentic AI is not agent. It's agents, but it's different. Agents are AI that does repetitive tasks based on rules. Agentic AI is more autonomous. It would be more about driving the vehicle for you, making decisions for you using a model. They work together, and the names are so similar that this is like a common. An agent would be rules based, where you would say, when the stock does this, do this. Agentic AI has the ability to go, I've looked at these 23 different things, and I'm making the decision based on that. Where agents are much more do this, then this. Agents are really good at answering rules-based. Agentic starts to use AI reasoning. They both can, but I see a place where you will get AI agents where this would be using the plumber analogy, where the agentic AI is not emotional. It is not emotional. Right. It's making a decision based on things. Is it always right? No, but there's no emotion in that decision. It's based on algorithmic machine learning and putting a whole bunch of things together. And I do really, really think that is the future. And that's why I continuously say, like, we've got to absolutely pay attention to the past. I think it was the book, The Black Swan, that said, history is not a good predictor of the past. Like Nassim is like one of the best statisticians in the world, but it's all we have. Like that. So that's what he said. Like, as a statistician, so we use it because it's all we have. And the Black Swan events are the events that in the real world, like the Spain outage is a Black Swan event. Like there are events that you can't plan for. You don't know what happens until it happens, and you and I in this role, like, we're constantly trying to, like, all right, like, looking at history, this happened before, what's going to happen? But we never had the level of AI. We never had the level of things that we had. So it's definitely different, and I would argue the next 6 months, AI is going to continue to evolve and continue to play a role in it. I don't know if it's true, but there was comments of like some of the tariff decisions, percentages where someone dumped something into a machine learning algorithm to get an answer, and that's what the government used. I don't know that that's true, but that was like all over the news, and I'm like, huh, uh, you know, that's interesting. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you don't have those conversations happening. The other thing that's different today is the TikTok piece. Um, TikTok pieces of the world, the social media, the information moving at the speed of light without validity. That's why, like, I think people should listen to a podcast like this, although we are somewhat opinionated. Like, you'll hear me, like, when I say a news story, I'm not validating or not validating. I'm even cautious sometimes to say who wrote it because it may not be true. But when I read a news story, I don't go like, oh my God, that's what it is. I go like, that doesn't make sense. That makes sense. That's probably, someone's opinion or voice. And, so I just searched this. I don't, today I'm in this mood of like searching things. So The Verge, Newsweek, AFR, I don't know what that is. The Guardian, Yahoo, media, pretty much anybody you can think of. The lines are Trump's new tariffs look like a ChatGPT calculation. Newsweek, did Trump use ChatGPT to allocate tariffs? The Guardian, are Trump's tariffs real or an AI hallucination? I'm afraid that they may have dumped these in the ChatGPT to get them. This is a type of information. It looks like Yahoo. Did ChatGPT use his tariffs, use ChatGPT to determine his tariffs? So here's my answers. If he did, I would argue that he's probably smarter than we think because it's not emotional then, and that you're actually using a really, really strong engine. I'm not saying he did or he didn't. I don't know. I've never read any of these articles, by the way, so I want to be clear that I just thought it was funny as we're talking about it. But when what we're talking about is we're in a society today where people have to ask that question. That should give you if you have to ask that question, you should realize how different it is than, the past, because in the past you would go like, man, he's going to smash that punch bowl. Him and three guys got in a room and they talked about it. There was no model telling them to do it. There was no math. It was someone deciding to do it. There wasn't influenced by social media. So we're in for a very interesting next few months to talk about it. And I don't think it's few years. I'm optimistic that this will get better. I also will say out loud that I don't think tariffs are a bad thing. I think that that tariffs are important to have. I think that if you travel a lot, I know you probably recognize the same thing. If you go to Germany, if you go to Asia, if you go to Japan, there are no U.S. cars, and there might be one or two. In China, I remember seeing my first U.S. car, and the person say, "Oh, I paid $600,000 for that." And I'm like, "Well, I could get one for like 90,000 and then like drive it onto a boat." And thinking to myself, "Holy moly, like that's a problem." And in Germany, like a American pickup truck is like a luxury item. So that's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I would agree. I mean, I think there's just, again, it goes back to the comment earlier. I think if you can understand the reasoning, or you can understand the amounts, you can understand what's happening, that de-escalates the situation a lot. I think it just doesn't seem to have been thought through, which is the bigger issue. It's affecting confidence rather than, hey, here's the plan. Yes, it looks reasonable. Great that these things were done by ChatGPT as a starting point, but hey, maybe review them after that, or ask the question differently,
I think no politics here. I think the reality is the way in which you approach something has a lot to do with the way confidence has. So I think to your point, explaining things in at detail and taking a slower approach often breeds confidence versus waking up on a Tuesday morning and going, what? Because that's exactly where we're at. So, all right, we talked a lot about a lot and a lot about nothing. So,
that's right.
Well, you got a long episode out of us today, so hopefully someone listens to it, and we would appreciate it if you like, subscribe, comment. If you want to join us, you don't need to be a genius economic brain like Shaun over there. You could just be someone that wants to talk about a topic. We love to have guests on. We it's our fault that guests aren't on. I think it's important that people reach out to us, and then we need to do a better job of getting it scheduled. So Shaun, thank you so much. Good to see you. I look forward to seeing the video in Vegas. I won't see you in Vegas next week. So
yeah, sorry to not have you there, but yeah, Brad and I will hold down the remote fort, and look forward to talking to everybody and bringing you some interesting content.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Cash News Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful. Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and be sure to visit us at thecashnews.com to stay up to date with the latest on the world of cash. Thanks again for listening to the Cash News Podcast.